Welcome, everybody, or welcome to this small group. I'm starting a minute or two early here, so I think the throngs are still collecting outside the door. But yes, so don't start early. Well, I'm just gonna roll with it here. So, my name is Andrew Baker. I'm a member of this congregation, and I'm delighted to be your worship host today. This is my once-a-year tradition these days, and we're grateful to have each and every one of you here today, both in the room and online. Take a look around and to the four corners of the room and the Zoom-niverse, and greet each other. Frank, who is here with us online today?
Let's see here. We have Roberta, Jennifer and Melvin, Molly, Christine, and Jen.
Wonderful. Welcome. Welcome to all of you. And I can see for our safety, we're still observing masking. We will be singing together behind our masks, so we're grateful for that return of that part of our ritual together, and we're very grateful for our music this morning. Thank you, Julia, for, as always, for your wonderful playing. And now I'd like to invite everyone to breathe. Breathe deeply. Come into the room, be present, be focused, be at peace. In the words of the Reverend Kathleen McTeague, we come together this morning to remind one another to rest for a moment on the forming edge of our lives, to resist the headlong tumble into the next moment until we claim for ourselves awareness and gratitude, taking the time to look into one another's faces and see communion. This house of laughter and silence, memory and hope is hallowed by our presence together. Let us take this time for quiet reflection as we listen in silence to the prelude. Thank you. Now I'd like to invite my friend Andrew Jelani up to light the chalice. And while he does that, we'll read together our chalice reading. May the light of this flame illuminate our minds. May the heat of this flame warm our hearts. May the focus of this flame bind us together in one loving community. And now I'd like you to open your hymnals to hymn number 25, God of the Earth, the Sky, the Sea. This is a new one for me, but I found it as I was preparing for this sermon, and I think of this as Creation 1.0. So let's give it a try. All right. There is Yahweh. So, join me in sharing our congregational covenant. In this house, we covenant with one another to create a community built on a foundation of love, to work together to promote equality, justice, and peace, accepting responsibility for our individual acts, to stand on the side of love, embracing the liberation of oppressed minorities, and working to end discrimination and unjust privilege, to communicate with kindness and support, and to serve with compassion and commitment, to listen respectfully and value our diversity as a source of our collective strength, to learn and grow together, generously sharing our time, talent, and treasures, to celebrate the joy of discovery from the wonder of youth to the wisdom of age, to openly share our laughter and our tears, showing reverence for the divine in all that is. And now, every week in our church, we take up an offering, which gives us the opportunity to exercise the generosity of spirit that supports All Souls and its many ministries. We see this act of giving, of growing more generous in our hearts and in our actions, as essential to our spiritual well-being. We'll now receive this morning's offering. Good morning again. This reflection I offer today on the Garden of Eden story arose serendipitously in response to a few casual references to the Hebrew creation story in sermons given by others in this pulpit last fall. That's one of the things I love about All Souls Church. Our lay leadership tradition is an unfolding conversation, a spiritual journey with an unknown destination. Let's see where this one takes us. Two thoughts arose in me when I heard the garden mentioned. One reverie brought me back to my first real encounter with the Bible 45 years ago as a college student of ancient European history. Back then, I was wrestling with the interplay of myth-making and history writing, trying to understand the mythopaic or myth-making consciousness of the Hebrews, one of the early peoples credited with bringing historical consciousness and linear chronologies to world culture. As a young man in my late teens and early 20s, I thought of myself as a Unitarian seeking to fully understand a Christianity I was drawn to but could not completely embrace. My second thought was rooted in a feeling of sadness, sorrow that this ancient creation story and the book that follows has been lost to so many of us, its complexity and richness canceled and forgotten. I fully understand the desire of many to reject and move on from a story and a book that underpins the patriarchy and misogyny that permeates what we call Western civilization. And I recognize my privilege as a person who has not been directly targeted with women-hating and homophobic biblical messaging when I say that this creation story should be preserved, understood, and reimagined into a new story for our times. A question in the news these days, what to do with Confederate monuments, raises similar thoughts and feelings. And there too, I contend, privileged as I am, that we cannot cancel our way to a new society. An equitable society can only be shaped by remembering and reinterpreting our history of injustice and wrongdoing through many experiences and voices. But I know that for many, this creation story is simply too toxic. I get that. So consider this my trigger warning. As I have learned more about my mother's family and my Jewish ancestry over these past 4 decades, I've come to understand that my choices about the Bible and the Torah are not binary. I cannot simply walk away from this story because it is my story. The ancient peoples who made this story are my people, for better or worse, for better and worse. And as it turns out, my wife, Andrea, is now in the process of completing her conversion to Judaism. This sermon is dedicated to her journey and to yours. So let's get ourselves back to the garden and see if we can get our souls free by better understanding and reinterpreting one of our origin stories. The first thing I appreciate about Hebrew creation myths is that they were written down a long time ago, maybe somewhere between 3,500 and 4,000 years ago. And they come down to us across the centuries through many languages, from Aramaic to Hebrew to Greek to Latin, and now to English. The second remarkable thing about those Hebrews is that they had not one, but 2 creation stories. Creation story 1.0, which we just sung about, is very straightforward. God creates the heavens and earth, mountains, rivers, fish, animals, insects, reptiles, trees, and plants, and men and women equally and out of the same materials. God hardly needs to say, "Go forth and multiply," and off we go. No real controversy there. We can easily harmonize this story with our own understanding of modern cosmology if we envision each day of creation lasting 1 billion years or so, give or take. But the fact that there are 2 origin stories should immediately clue us in that these Hebrews are not makers of neat, conventional, self-enclosed, circular time myths. These layered stories hint at even older sources and point outward toward an uncertain future and the beginnings of history making. The garden story raises many more questions than it answers, and its core message is built on a contradiction. The garden story reflects the Hebrews' messy process of evolving into history, into a history-making monotheistic people in a crowded polytheistic neighborhood. The second creation story, Creation 2.0, is where all the trouble starts. In the Garden of Eden story, God creates Adam out of mud and Eve out of Adam's rib, differentiating them, and in the conventional telling, thereby subordinating women. There's the tree of knowledge, the apple, the serpent, temptation, disobedience, and punishment, the fall from grace and exile from the garden. The patriarchal gloss on this story is that Eve is to blame. She gets tagged with original sin, and all women after her get to share in that gender-based guilt. You know the drill. Sadly, what gets lost behind the gag order of this women-hating catechism are all the juicy questions this story is chock full of. The first creation story was all well and good as grand cosmology, but it didn't get at the real-life questions about who we are as humans that those Hebrews were grappling with. Questions like, why do we have to die? What is consciousness? Why do we feel alienated? What is sexual shame all about? Why do we have to work for a living? Why is childbirth so painful? And why do we hate snakes so much? This is good material. Material that literature and philosophy across many cultures have been working with down through the centuries. The richness of this story is one reason it remains with us over thousands of years. The idea of the devil's bargain, which travels down from Eve to Yeshua out on his 40-day walkabout, still holds power in modern parlance, even among speakers who no longer remember the creation story or identify with Judeo-Christianity. The richness and power of its questions and tensions may be one of the keys to how this garden story will break through its patriarchal patina and remain worth retelling with new meanings for our times and beyond. One thing I appreciate about my Jewish forebears is that Jewish storytellers have always had a gift for borrowing and riffing on the myths of the dominant culture they find themselves living amongst or next to. That was true of Irving Berlin in the 20th century, an immigrant Russian Jew who wrote some of the most quintessentially American songs in the Great American Songbook. I could name many others. And it was true all the way back to those ancient Hebrew storytellers who borrowed and reshaped the myths of their Mesopotamian neighbors. The tree of life and the tree of knowledge, for example, are motifs found in the myths of many cultures. In other tellings, a precious gift for the dragon guarding the tree, or a sacrifice of something dearly held, like eyesight, was needed to gain deep wisdom. These symbols and stories circulated across the Fertile Crescent for centuries in oral tradition before getting written down. So it is unlikely the Hebrews were first authors. We know for sure that the Mesopotamian story of Utnapishtim and the flood prefigured Noah. The serpent is a potent symbol, not just because we humans have been hardwired to fear snakes through interactions with the poisonous varieties over many thousands of years. It is also an enduring symbol of sexuality. And like the tree of knowledge, the serpent is a borrowed motif. Neighboring polytheistic cultures use serpents and other symbols of masculine potency and feminine fertility in art and ritual. The serpent is associated with the earth, the labyrinth and mystery cults, the cave womb, and the life-giving power of women. By refashioning the serpent into an embodiment of evil, and later of the devil, our Hebrew authors were embedding an implicit warning about avoiding seduction by the religions of their powerful urban neighbors. Eve's original sin of disobedience to Yahweh is also marked by the serpent as the sin of worshiping false idols, a theme that gets picked up more explicitly with Moses and the golden calf. To see this dynamic more clearly at work in Hebrew society, it helps me to imagine Eve not as some abstract first being, but as a young woman from a neighboring tribe, perhaps being purchased for some number of goats and united in marriage with a Hebrew man. How do I get there? Embedded in the notion of sexual shame in the garden story, Eve is tempted by the serpent, eats the apple, gains knowledge, shares it with Adam, and realizes she's naked. Embedded within that is the incest taboo. That is to say, once you start multiplying, don't have sex with your parents, your children, or your brothers and sisters. The story of Lot and his daughter makes this crystal clear. And embedded within the incest taboo is the corollary principle of exogamy, which is the practice of marrying women outside your tribe. Exogamy is a key survival strategy for humans, particularly when living in small kinship bands, as the early Hebrews did. It keeps the gene pool strong. But with exogamy come cultural problems. That young woman coming to marry Adam was likely carrying small clay figures in her bundle of possessions, household gods from her own religious cult. To keep the cult of Yahweh from dissipating back into polytheism, strong magic was needed to convince these neighbor women to abandon their religions and raise their children as Yahweh-fearing Hebrews. Hence the reframing of the serpent from potent fertility god to symbol of evil, while subordinating women and feminine spiritual power in the process. Looming over the garden story and its many questions is a pervasive feeling of nostalgia, mourning a loss of innocence. Universally, we feel this in our own lives as the loss of our childhood selves, of the time when we were unburdened by sexual self-consciousness. The garden story is also mourning our alienation from the natural world, the loss of a more integrated sense of kinship with creation, with animals and plants. In a modern retelling of this creation story, we can imagine this more integrated sense of kinship as a time when our smaller-brained hominid forebears were more similar to their primate cousins. As the brain power of our evolving species grew, and increasing knowledge allowed us to better distinguish good apples from poisonous fruits, our skulls grew larger, and childbirth consequently became more painful. Evolutionary biology actually bears out this link between eating the apple of knowledge and the punishment of painful childbirth, though that science is fairly recent. Hebrew storytellers 3,800 years ago also shared in the nostalgia carried in the stories of their neighbors for the lost world of their hunter-gatherer forebears. Might they have seen and known hunter-gatherer tribes, or just heard about them in centuries-old legends? We don't know. The story of Jacob and Esau, in which Esau is described as a hairy man of the forest, and Jacob as smooth, in more ways than one, borrows from and riffs on the much older Mesopotamian story of Gilgamesh and Enkidu. In that story, Enkidu is the hairy man of the forest who can speak with the animals, but is tamed and civilized through sexual congress with a temple priestess. Esau is cheated by the younger Jacob, who, despite being a deceiver, is favored by God. The history makers are the tricksters. How revealing. The hairy men who came down in this oral tradition might have been hunter-gatherers. In our evolutionary cosmology, we might imagine them as Neanderthals or other hominids. These mythical yetis might even have been orangutans in their earliest form. In the garden story, Adam's punishment is that he can no longer eat the fruit of the forest like the orangutan. His increasing knowledge may give him a survival edge against hunger and famine, but also chains him to his technology, the plow. Now we come to the basic contradiction at the heart of the garden story. Eve's original sin, eating the apple from the tree of knowledge, is disobedience. The wages of her sin for women are alienation from nature, hard work, painful childbirth, sexual shaming, and subjugation by men. But by taking a risk, gaining knowledge, and getting booted out of Eden, Eve sets the whole process of history in motion. And in religious terms, she is the one who gets into active dialogue with God, a sort of pre-covenantal relationship. We only get to the covenant, the essential Hebrew story, through this original tete-a-tete between God and Eve. This is how it goes. When God notices that Adam and Eve are hiding in the bushes, God naturally wants to know what's going on. Adam promptly narks on the only other member of his species and tells God that Eve ate the apple and then persuaded him to try it. God might have then said to Adam, I'm reading between the lines here, go sit over there and eat some matzah with hummus. I'll deal with Eve. And then God lays out for her what marrying into this Hebrew clan is all about. God sounds almost apologetic in telling her, your yearning shall be for your husband, yet he shall lord it over you. As if God is saying, you're going to make bad relationship choices because these Hebrew boys, they're all no good nicks. In my modern retelling of the garden story, Eve is recast as the first scientist. She uses her curiosity and the empirical method to experiment with an unknown plant species. She takes risks, and like Galileo, Copernicus, and many others after her, defies the social and religious conventions of her time to expand the bounds of human knowledge. Was the apple an English to Aramaic substitute for psilocybin mushrooms, wheat argot, or other mind-expanding substances? Leaving psychedelics aside, Eve, as representative of her hunter-gatherer foremothers, deserves the major credit for inventing agriculture. But here's the challenge for us in that innovation. When God punishes Adam for listening to Eve, God says, accursed shall be the soil because of you. With suffering shall you get your food from it. This was no hypothetical. The Hebrew authors of this story lived alongside the great hydraulic civilizations of Mesopotamia and Egypt, which greatly increased the productivity of agriculture through irrigation. At times, the Hebrews were enslaved as farm laborers. Yet there is evidence that some of those ancient urban centers may have declined or collapsed due to salination of the soil from irrigation, a warning for our mechanized monoculture farming. If in our Creation 3.0 retelling, we imagine what those early societies could have been like had they been led by Eve's descendants, female agricultural scientists, instead of warriors, could they have produced and distributed plenty while regulating their population growth and eliminating warfare? Could they have used their knowledge to restore connection to nature and thus engineer a return to the garden? If this were and will be possible, where will they and we redirect all the testosterone? In our own small corner of the world here in Franklin County, a version of this Back to the Garden utopia quest played out in the Back to the Land movement of the 1960s and 70s. Yet the wholesale canceling or rejecting of mainstream values in the furnace of the Vietnam War often led to cultural blind spots. Rejecting and forgetting history can do that. Sexism and male domination often continue to persist, even in those utopian communes and spiritual societies. These modern pilgrims and the more conventional ex-urban migrants that followed them, those of us drawn to a simpler small town life, have managed to turn Franklin County from farm-based Republican to university-based Democrat. But we remain a long way from the garden. We have not substantially reduced our carbon footprint or reined in our hyper-consuming American way of life. The challenge we face today is that all 8 billion of us are not going to be able to return to a hunter-gatherer Eden. And as Americans, we are just 4% of the world's population, but continue to use 20% of the world's resources, 5 times our share. We will have to use our accumulated knowledge to power down, decarbonize, reduce our numbers, increase equity, and try to avert or moderate the worst climate catastrophes. Most of that work we leave to our children and grandchildren. We remain caught in the devil's bargain, but we cannot unbite the apple. There is no easy path back to the garden. Yet what makes the garden story so compelling is that at its heart lie the fundamental tensions inherent in our existence as a social species: obedience versus curiosity, social conformity versus risk-taking and innovation, tradition versus science. The truth is, we need both. As individualistic Americans, we reflexively value risk-taking and innovation over obedience and conformity. And we are right to reject obedience to unjust social systems. But social conformity or collective agreement is required to enact the basic social rules of civility: listening deeply, giving everyone a turn, voting rights. These social conventions are essential to building functioning democracies. And without real democracy, without dialogue among equals, science is bent back as a weapon in the hands of warriors bent on domination. In our creation story 3.0, we seek to build human societies that can reconcile risk-taking and innovation within a social context of social equality and mutual respect, while remaining focused on the urgent task of reintegrating ourselves with our ecosystem. That is what our UU covenant tells us. There is no garden like that to get back to, only a garden we are called to create. Our messy and troubling 2.0 Garden of Eden story reminds us just how challenging that project remains. We would do well not to erase or forget it. Let us bring the innocence of our beginner minds and hearts to that project and make it so. See, I freely join with Eve and the serpent of nature to taste the apple. And yes, God, it is good. We turn now to hymn number 207. Earth was given as a garden. Here we can find in our singing our UU version of Creation 3.0. Now is the time in our service for sharing joys and sorrows. If you have a sorrow that needs the help of this community to carry, or a joy so great that you must share it, now is the time. You may share with the congregation, a microphone will be brought to you, or light a candle at the sides of the sanctuary. If you are sharing with the congregation, please note that this is not a time for personal or political announcements. We care for each other by being true to the purpose of this time. We also care for each other by our brevity, so please be brief. There will be an opportunity over here to the side after the service for longer conversation and for sharing announcements. A very great joy that we feel today is to have visitors to All Souls. During this time of joys and sorrows, we invite you to introduce yourself, and while this is not required, we would love the opportunity to welcome you. Now is the time for welcoming visitors and sharing joys and sorrows. Oh, you've got that.
Looks like we have one on Zoom already. So go ahead, Molly.
Yes, I'd like to light a candle of sorrow for the death in Memphis, Tennessee of Tyree Nichols, which is causing a national mourning for his death, his killing by 5 police officers, which has raised the questions again about police brutality and violence. Thank you.
And I have one to share. My echocardiogram came back okay, so my heart is not weird. So all they got to do is put me on a monitor next, and we'll see how that goes.
Who wants to light the candles? Thank you, Annie.
Hi, good morning. My name is Ellen. I want to light a candle of sorrow, but hopeful. My brother Gene was 7 years in remission, but has had a recurrence of the cancer, the melanoma that he recovered from years ago. And so he's doing a whole process of treatment this month and next. And so in prayers of hope for him. Also, for myself, I discovered I've been struggling with music and singing, and my voice was gone for a while. It is back, thank God. But singing voice is really weird. And I realized that I kind of don't remember most of the music I used to know. It isn't that I don't remember the songs, I don't know what the songs are. So I look in my brain and I go, what are the songs you used to sing? And I come up with 3. And there used to be maybe 100. So it's weird. I'm hopeful I can just sit down and learn music again. But it's a bit of sorrow that kind of lives in my brain and scares me a bit. So I'm not sure what that kind of candle that would be. Hopeful wish of ending the sadness that I feel about that. And thank you.
Thanks, Ellen. So I'm Kate Mason, and I just want to light a candle for hearts. How tricky they are, and electrical, and how important. And I just know there's lots of people in this room who are trying to make peace with their hearts in all sorts of ways.
Hello, my name is Jean. I would also like a candle of sorrow for what happened to Tyree Nichols. And just pray for his family, his parents, his family, for what they are going to have to go through and what many, many African-American and brown people have to go through in this country at the hands of police. And I just hope and pray that at some time, at some point in this country, we will be able to deal with this situation. And just pray. Thank you.
Good morning. My name's Russ. And I have feelings that echo some of what we've heard, but could you light a candle for, I'm going to say concern. I'm diabetic. I take insulin and I don't know why, but my numbers have been they haven't been so great lately. And I don't really know why. And I'm feeling concerned. Thank you.
I'm Catherine Baker. I'm Andrew's stepmom. And have been here so many times, but I just haven't been here in a long time, maybe pre-COVID. So I just want to say it's lovely to be back. And particularly appreciated Andrew's inspiration that we can all get behind Creation 3.0. I like your concept, Andrew.
Good morning, I'm Rob. I echo what Catherine said and always enjoy seeing your mind out loud. I thought it was an interesting, I don't even know if you call it a faux pas, but in the covenant, when you said to openly share our laughter and our fears, because I think your sermon did just that. Given longer, there may have been tears too. But in the spirit of laughter and fears, Annie, would you light a candle, please, for my dear friend Robert Rivest, who is literally someone who moves for a living. He's a dancer, and even he took a tumble down the stairs and wound up in the hospital with serious knee problems. Thankfully, is recovering. And also a candle for my own sweetheart, Debka, who had a colonoscopy and was very concerned that they might find polyps and diverticuli, but thankfully, the only thing they found was a couple classified documents.
Frank, anybody over there?
I'm Sandra, and I'd like to light a candle for the leaders in Greenfield who are struggling to identify how we as a town meet the challenge of racism in our police department. And there is a wonderful contingent of young people who are leading the confrontation with our mayor, who is trying to whitewash and sweep under the rug the conviction of racism in our town. And I just want to honor their resilience, their not giving up, their respectful way of conducting the challenge, because it's ongoing. It's happening over and over again. And anyone who's watching the town council meetings is aware of how it's being conducted. But I want to hold them in our hearts and minds and just be supportive in any way we can for reaching for justice in this community.
Sandra. I'd like to say hi to Jen and Mel, who are out there somewhere. So nice that they are joining us. And out in Texas, where they've moved 2 weeks ago, 1 week ago. So welcome, Jen and Mel.
Oh, I'm Annie. I had so much in my heart today. Thank you, Molly. And picking up the paper or seeing the news again about a young Black man dying at the hands of the police officers. Also, all the senseless killings, I mean, every day in California, people for no apparent reason. Think about those people, the family thinking it could be me, could be my ex-girlfriend that's out there. Also thinking today of Wally and Juanita, what would they do? Sick and tired of being sick and tired of it. And I know that there's a wonderful group of people that live in Greenfield that are working to change what's happening. I know it's slow, I know it's painful, but we're working at it. Another candle, I have a friend named Amy. She had to have very intense radiation chemotherapy, really holding that she can overcome that. And a candle of joy for me, that as half of me that relates as a woman, that I didn't have to grow up under the oppression of many different countries, because I know if I did, I'd be dead by now. So I'm grateful that I live in the United States for now.
Well, let's light one more candle for all of those joys and sorrows that we hold in our hearts and have not yet spoken. And I'd like to invite us now into a time of silent reflection. Spirit of community in which we share and find strength and common purpose, we turn our minds and hearts toward one another, seeking to hold in our hearts all our joys and sorrows, both spoken and unspoken. Let us open our minds and hearts to the place of quiet, to the silent prayer for the healing of pain, and the soft, gentle coming of love. And to consecrate that feeling, please join in singing Prayer to Friends, which you'll find as an insert in the front of your hymnal. The blessing of truth be upon us, the power of love direct and sustain us, and may the peace of this community preserve our going out and our coming in from this time forth until we meet again. Go in peace, create peace, and be peace. Thank you, Julia. Are there any announcements?
I'll use it anyway. I'm with the membership committee, and one of the things we do is we arrange to have somebody in the entryway as a greeter for each service. Sometimes those of us on the community take turns doing it, but we're always interested in having somebody else try it sometime. So if anybody's interested who's either done it or even never done it, you're not on the committee, come on over and talk to me after the service. Thanks a lot.
We do have coffee here, so I invite people to come over and be cautiously socially distanced as you take off your mask to drink coffee.